Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Daly, one of the co-founders here at Ampt, and welcome to another Thursday live stream where hopefully we learn some cool things about the cloud and how Ampt can help you achieve some of those goals and make things a little bit easier for you. So today I wanted to talk about CloudFront. So if you're not familiar with CloudFront, I guess we could probably bring this up over here, but let's see, Amazon CloudFront. So CloudFront is Amazon's. It's weird that it's okay. It's content delivery network, or it's CDN, and it has a lot of really great capabilities, including how things get routed, the ability to add things like WAFs to them, and some other things that you can do. Guard duty that's built in. Plus, you can pay for an advanced version of guard duty that will do some protection against DDoS and some of these. Or sorry, not guard duty. Shield, AWS Shield. Okay, too many AWS services. Anyways, some pretty cool things that you can do with this, including the ability to cache. I mean, that's basically what a CDN sort of is, right? It's supposed to cache. It's supposed to cache information and then distribute it to all the different POPs around the world, so that that the data loads faster and things happen more quickly for you, and lower latency for the customer or for your users. A little bit reduced stress on your origin servers, things like that. But I think a lot of this kind of gets away from people, especially when you're building things like APIs and other things where the data is very dynamic, and you say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to query the database every single time? And if you're familiar with, I should have found the picture of this. Caching is hard sometimes, and I remember I was at a startup several years ago, and we had so many layers of caching, including we were using memcached, and we were using what were we using at the Apache level? Now I can't remember the name of it, but we're using all these different layers of caching, and essentially the problem was that if something wasn't updating right, or there was some missing piece of information, or something wasn't working right, it was almost certainly a caching issue. And that was the response so many times that I literally put a sign above my desk that just said it's a caching issue, and when people would come and ask, I would point at it, and there you go. So sometimes it's easier to avoid caching, especially if you have a lot of changing data, a lot of moving parts, things like that. But there's also times in which you're loading information that doesn't need to be dynamic every single page load, or an API call that's retrieving some sort of data that doesn't need to be dynamic every single time that it's loaded. So the question is how do you mitigate or build in layers of caching that, one, are sort of self-managed in the sense that you don't have to be constantly thinking about it, and then other ways in which it just makes a lot more sense where you're reducing the load on the system. So caching is great from a data standpoint. Let's say that you have, you're putting a Memento cache, or maybe Redis or something like that, and you're putting that as a way to cache some data coming from your database. Maybe you're running, some of your queries are pretty intensive, and you want to cache the results of those queries so that you can serve that data back to the user. It's a great way to use caches. Big fan of using caches that way as well. But you're still, doing processing on the quote unquote server, whether that's a Lambda function or a ECS container or something like that, or an EC2 instance. You're still doing calculations, and you're still using processing power on the server itself, and you're also reaching across the wire to get that information. So if it's somebody that is, say, in Europe, or maybe they're in South Africa, or ooh, this is weird. Sorry, I thought I had fixed this. Hold on a second. Let me see if my thing comes back. Okay, weird. I thought I had that fixed. Anyways, so maybe you're anywhere. You're in Japan. You're in Australia. Or you're somewhere. If you have to reach back to US East 1 every single time you want to grab a piece of data, even if it's being cached in Memcache or Memento or something, in US East 1, you're still using that processing power. You're still, challenging the speed of light to get that information. Whereas some of that could be cached on the local POP, right? The point of presence that Amazon CloudFront is able to do or is able to provide. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is just where you maybe can take advantage of some of those things, and then also how you can do that with Ampt, because again, Ampt has a sort of some default caching behavior that we use to make life a little bit easier for you, but you do have control over that, and so I kind of want to get into that a little bit. Okay, enough of a setup. So Ampt, if you're not familiar with Ampt, Ampt essentially is a dev tool that allows developers to deploy applications to AWS without having to worry about configurations. We do a lot of pre-provisioning for you. We do all the account allocation, permissions, some of these other things. And then we actually read your application code in and use that to configure the environment that we deploy your application to. Every environment is completely isolated, which means you have all that isolation, no resource contention, anything like that. And then we build what we call high fidelity environments or high fidelity sandboxes, which gives you that production parity. So even when you're working in a development sandbox, you're not trying to emulate things locally, things like that. We like that method because we think that guarantees or gives you a much higher guarantee that if it works on my machine, it's going to work in production because it's actually running directly in an AWS account. Okay, let's quickly jump into a little bit about where the CDN works, how the CDN works within Ampt. So we just, again, everything deploys to AWS, so we use as much of AWS and the built-in features and capabilities of AWS as we possibly can. That is also very true with our content delivery network that we provide. This is essentially just CloudFront. It's exactly CloudFront. We do some cool things with some edge functions and some other things in order to do some routing and static routing and some other cool things like that. But for the most part, it is 100% CloudFront and the capabilities that provides. So you can take advantage of whatever CloudFront gives you, and we expose some of that to you to make it easy to manage your applications. So first thing is first is if you are unfamiliar with an Ampt application, and maybe what we should do actually, let's jump in. Let's quickly spin up an Ampt application, and then we can see how some of this stuff actually works. So let me do this. Let me jump over to VS Code. So this is just Visual Studio Code here. I'll open, not that, open this. I am just in a local directory on my machine for a sandbox that I have here. And let's make a directory and let's call this CDN demo. And I'm going to CD into the CDN demo like that. And then I'll open this up in code. And then we can go ahead and open our, okay, so here's our directory with nothing in it. I'm just gonna go ahead and type in Ampt. Ampt is just the Ampt CLI. You can also run npx at ampt/CLI as well. That would also work, but you can install the Ampt CLI globally, and then you get this really great Ampt command that you can just run and do a bunch of cool things with it. So essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm spinning up a new Ampt application, and what it does is, of course, I have to select my organization, so I'm going to select this demo organization. Yes, I'd like to create the new app, and then it gives me some options in terms of which types of apps I want to create. These are all JavaScript, TypeScript applications. You can use either one, and we just kind of give you some starter things here. So I'm going to use Hono. Again, I use Hono quite a bit, but I really do like it. So this was called CDN demo, so that's what I'm going to name it. Would you like to use the current directory? Yes. So this is now essentially creating a new AWS account for me, provisioning that for me, putting all of the pre-provisioning all these technologies in it, and then it is now syncing this code from my local machine into that remote sandbox for me, connecting me to the real-time logs, as it says. And now I have this URL that if I click onto this URL and open in my browser here, I now have this static page that's loading that is, and I'll show you where that static page comes from. Essentially, that's in this static folder here. So there's this index.html file that is the static file that says, I don't know where the... Hold on, let me just make this a little bigger so we can find it. So this is the placeholder to get you started. This is the placeholder to get you started. So if we wanted to, let's say, let's go ahead and get rid of this. We'll get rid of all this stuff here and say this is a test static page on Ampt like this. Now, I haven't saved this page yet, but watch this little lightning bolt down there. As soon as I click save, you see that it spins. It tells me that it was last synced a second ago. I can jump over here, immediately refresh, and I'm going to see the changes to this static page. Okay, so let's talk about static pages first. We'll get into some of the other things in a minute. So static pages, again, are actually uploaded when you make changes to your application in your dev sandbox. That is actually being served from the dev sandbox. We're actually saving that into a Lambda function. It gets served through sort of an API request. That's meant so that it's not cached, right? We don't want this particular asset that we send back to you. We don't want this cached, and that's because, again, we don't want to have to keep clearing the CDN when we're in a development mode. It's okay if we have to reload a bunch of assets. We're not too concerned about the performance when we're doing the dev side of things. We're more concerned about the rapid speed of iteration. So if we click into the inspect panel here on our Google Chrome, we'll go over to our network tab, and we will just go ahead and click all here. I'm going to refresh this. And this is going to show us that it loaded this fantastic code page here, this ampt.svg, which is our little logo there, and then this Hono logo like that. Now, if we click into, say, the Hono logo, and I'll make this a little bit bigger, and we go and we look at the response headers, we'll see that the cache control is max age equals 0, must revalidate, and then we see some other information about it as well, and then some X cache, and then what we'll see here is this X cache control, which is what would be served if this was in a production account. So the actual cache control header that we're seeing says don't save this on the CDN because we want to be able to we want to be able to quickly update this or change this if we need to. But this X cache control, if you did want to see what you were spitting out for cache control, you would be able to see this on this level here. So this is just a really helpful way for you to understand what the cache control would be. This 86,400 seconds is one day or 24 hours. And so that is what the default is for all static assets to be saved that way. Okay. But you're seeing that it comes through as X cache control as opposed to cache control. So if we go back to our application over here, let's go ahead and deploy this to a dev environment or to what we call a permanent stage. So I don't have any deployment protections here. You can enable that so you can't deploy to prod or something from your CLI, which is usually pretty good once you have your CI/CD pipeline set up, which we do all for you. But I'm just going to go ahead and deploy this to, I'm just going to call this staging. Actually, I'm just going to call it prod. Why not? We'll just call this prod. So I'm going to deploy a new application. It says, do you want to deploy a new stage prod? Yes, I do. I don't know why there was that weird artifact there. So what this is now doing, and if I can't jump to it from there, but if I went, well, I'll show you in a second. Let this process here. So this is actually creating an entirely new AWS account, which is pretty cool. And then taking the code that I have in my sandbox and actually taking that code and deploying that into and building that for a production environment. So this usually takes 15 to 30 seconds depending on the complexity of what you're doing and whether there's build steps and some of these other things. But essentially I now have this magical stack here. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to open this, and this is going to open that exact same page. This is a test static page on Ampt, so this is all here again. I'm going to go over to inspect, go to my network tab, and I'll refresh this to get the data again. I'm going to look at this Hono here, and now when I scroll down and I look at the cache control, I'll see exactly what I was getting from the X cache control the last time. And then there should be no X cache control here because it's because we don't want to see it, or because it doesn't make any sense to send that in a production environment. So we are seeing that the X cache, this is a hit from CloudFront, right? Which is exactly what we want, right? So now every time I refresh this page, not only is this page here a cache and hit from CloudFront, we can go down to the X cache down here, but the Ampt logo is a hit from CloudFront here, and the Hono here is a hit from CloudFront. So now what this means is every time I refresh this is super fast. This is not even hitting our application in the background. This doesn't even have to touch our origin servers. It's just loading directly from the cache. Okay, that's pretty standard stuff. Hopefully it's pretty standard stuff. So that's the basics of the static application. And one thing I just wanted to show too, I'm gonna go ahead and type in open here. This will open me into into our dashboard, which I'm not logged into, so I'll quickly log in. And this is the CDN demo app that we're in right here. And you can see we have our sandbox that's running, as well as this production environment here. And so the production environment gives us, again, all these things just give us information, including like information about the deployment, all our deploy logs, all kinds of things like that. Okay, so one of the things that is different about a development environment and a production environment, as I mentioned, is the information from these static assets, or the static assets themselves. In a dev sandbox, they're actually being loaded from Lambda, as I said. But in the production or in any sort of permanent stage, they actually are getting deployed to a S3 bucket that stores those static assets for you. And then we use an edge function that does some routing, so we know if it matches a static asset, we route it to the static asset path and load that static asset, as opposed to hitting a Lambda function to try to load it from within there. So it's pretty intelligent how that stuff works, and I want to say pretty straightforward. It's straightforward. It's very complex behind the scenes. It has to do a little bit of magic to make that work, but it is a very powerful thing. Okay, so those are static assets. That's basically the standard way that they would work. And just kind of going through some of this stuff. So there are two types of what we consider, I guess, static or long-lived assets that you can deploy, that get deployed into an S3 bucket and are served from the S3 bucket, not including things like index, any sort of static files like JavaScript, some of those other things. So all that stuff gets stored in that static directory. That by default gives you a 24-hour time window. Now the thing that's cool about the way that we do this is, when you run a deployment, we will actually clear out the assets. We will do an invalidation against your CloudFront distribution. So we'll make sure we invalidate any of those old files that would show up there, and refresh with the new ones. And so the other side of it, though, is the public bucket that we give you. So if you wanted to take a photo, for example, let me go over to. We'll go over here, click into storage. I'll double click into public here. And if we wanted to create a folder or create an image now or something that we want to load in this public folder, if I went and uploaded something, so let me see if I can find something quickly that I can upload. Let's see, do I have an image here? Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take... Sorry, it's off screen here, so I've got to drag this all the way across. I'm going to drop this file in. This is just the storage.png that basically is just for our Ampt docs. Like, these files are generated to kind of tell you information about it. So here I have the storage.png. So if I go and I open this again, this is loading this directly from the browser, directly from S3, and it's giving me a signed URL and so forth. But it actually is a public object because I put it in this public bucket. So if I go and I actually open the public URL for this, now you can see that it's on the same magical stack 13783.amp.app. It's on the same place, and it shows as public storage. All right, I'm going to inspect this and... Oops, go back there, go to the network tab, and I'm going to refresh this. And now when I click on storage and we look at the headers here, we're going to see that there's a last modified tag, and it's a miss from CloudFront. And then if we go up, there will be no caching headers here. We'll just get an E tag and a last modified. So the E tag and the last modified is just a way that essentially your browser can be more efficient by sending the request as an E tag and say, is this somehow different than the file that you're supposed to get? But it still has to make a round trip. The browser itself wouldn't be caching it, I think, at that point. So every time I refresh this, though, we're going to see that this is, in fact, this is a refresh. So this is the refresh hit from this. This is using the E tag to do that. But essentially, it is storing this locally because I have the E tag and because I've loaded it on my browser. Problem is that if I was to open this on a different browser, and let me see if I can do this, see if this actually works. Let me open an incognito window and let me inspect and go to network and then refresh this here. So now I get this, and I should get, Again, every refresh hit. This might be because of my browser, the way that that's working. But essentially, there's no caching on the server side. So unless your browser can do the magic in order to know that it's a refreshed hit, if I was pulling this from another machine or whatever, it's going to have to go through and it's going to have to fetch that that image for me again, because it's not being cached in the in the CloudFront distribution. Now, part of this makes sense because let's say that I wanted to change this image somehow. So let's see if I can actually do that. I'm going to go here and I'm going to open with preview. And I'm going to move this over here so we can see it. So I just have this open in preview, and let's say that I want to do something to it. I guess I can maybe mark it up. Let me draw, I don't know, I'll draw a little square on it here. And I'm going to go ahead and change the color of that square. I think I can do this to blue. Okay. All right. So I just made this horrible looking thing here, and I'm going to go ahead and save this. And this should now be what I have for storage. So let me just double check. Open that again. Yep, that looks ugly. All right. So I'm going to go back over back over here, and I'm going to upload that same image again. And drop this in here, and it's going to say, yeah, I want to replace it. So that should replace that image. And now when I load this over here and refresh, the E tag would have changed. So this should say a miss from CloudFront, and it's going to load this new image for me. So that happens instantaneously. Just in terms of a use case that you might have for the public bucket, for example. This would be anything that you want, anything that's unique to the environment, not to the application itself. So that's sort of the way we make the distinction, is anything that you're building that's a static asset. That might be, JavaScript bundles, it might be CSS files, it might be images, that are related to like your logo and some of these other things. But let's say that you're uploading product images, or you're creating, what else? Let's say you're creating, profile images for your users, and you're saving those there, or you're generating PDFs that have to do with, billing, something like that. These are those things that you're going to want to go ahead and generate and make them available. Maybe the invoices you wouldn't make public, but something like a profile picture you would. And there's a couple different ways that you could do that. Is you don't want to go and invalidate someone's profile picture every time their profile picture changes. That's just too much overhead that you would have to put on the CDN. And if you're familiar, it does cost money every time you invalidate items in the CDN. So you want to be careful about how often you do something like that. So you do want to cache those things for a longer period of time. Okay, through the interface, through uploading them here, again, this is more of a management utility. We just actually made a bunch of changes to this too to make life a little bit easier. It's a little bit more efficient now in order to interact with your storage buckets. If you have thousands and thousands of records, you can now view them all. You don't have to worry about limits and stuff like that. So it's very, very handy, the changes we made to this. But what you can do is you can actually create things programmatically through the storage interface and save those things to your bucket or to your public bucket. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll see how we can actually do some of that stuff. So one of the things that we have here, let's see if I can find it. I guess it's going to be through our storage interface here. So in the storage, we have, I'll make this a little bigger so we get the sidebar. We have serving public objects. Okay, so anything you upload into your buckets are going to be private, and you don't have to worry about those being exposed. Everything is automatically locked down. But if you put things in the /public directory, those will be available. And then we have a little note down here that says, we do not set cache control headers for your public objects by default. That is an option we give you with this max data option here. Okay, so this is what's kind of cool about the way that this stuff works. So if I, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and copy some information here so we have it. All right, so actually I'm just gonna write, I guess I could copy it or I could just write it. I mean, shouldn't be too hard. All right, so let's jump over here. The other thing I quickly wanna show also is there is this index file here. And this is a more dynamic, we would never cache this by default, and we're gonna get into this in a second. But essentially this is the actual app itself. This is the dynamic part of the app. And so this is just running a Hono API. If you're not familiar with Hono, very cool, hono.dev. I love it. I'm gonna go ahead and just get rid of all of this extra stuff here, because again, these are just different routes that it's showing, and for some reason I can't highlight that, but I'm gonna do that anyways. Why is my keyboard's not working? Just having all kinds of technical problems today. See if this helps. Okay, that's not working. Okay, let's see what we got going on here. Why is my keyboard not working? Okay, seems to be working over there. Okay, don't know why it wasn't working, but I'm just going to delete these extra. I'm going to delete these extra paths here so that it'll be super simple. So we import Hono, we create a new Hono app or new instance of Hono. We do a .get that's going to give us a hello from Ampt, and we have an app.fire. So we'll sync that, and then we'll go back over to this page here, and we go to /hello as the route told us it was, and we get hello from Ampt. Okay, so now every time we load this, and I'll show you this quickly. This is going to give us a max age 0, must read it, validate, just as it would. And then notice that because this is dynamic, we're not going to get an X cache control header, because we don't ever cache this. So for example, let me go here, and I'm just going to add on to this math.random like this, so that we get a random number every time we do that. We'll click over here, refresh. So now we're getting this random number every single time we refresh. I'm going to deploy this to prod again, if I could spell it right, like that. So this will go ahead and deploy to production. And this will take, again, a couple of seconds. And what's cool is, again, if you're in your interface over here and you go to deployments, for example, you can see that this is actively deploying right now. Just gives you hopefully plenty of visibility so you can see what's going on and what's happening. So again, this usually takes, I don't know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that, all depending on the size of it and how fast the control planes for AWS are working behind the scenes. Okay, so this is now redeployed here. And so this one here is my magical stack. This is the prod version of it. And again, when you're in here, you can see magical stack there, and then I can jump over to my other environment. See, that's the fantastic code one. So let's jump over here. And so go to this and do /hello and refresh that. And then we'll get hello from Ampt, and we will see that this hello path now, again, has no cache headers. And will be a miss from CloudFront. And if I refresh this, we're going to see a different thing every single time, because by default, we are not going to cache these things. Okay, let's go back, look at the programmatic way in which we can create assets in the public directory and add a cache control header to them. So I'll go back to my code here, and I'm going to import storage from the Ampt SDK, and just in case, just to double check, I'm going to install at ampt /SDK. You can use, if you're using PNPM or Yarn, it'll know, so it'll use the right install for you if you just use this install shortcut. This way you just don't have to jump out of the CLI in order to do that. So we now have the CDN package successfully installed, and storage is used but never created. So I'm just going to do, let's see, do app. Actually, you know what I have? Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find this quickly, because I already wrote this code so many times, and rather than reinventing the wheel, let's see if I can find this quickly. Oh, that's the one I did on tasks. Hold on one second. Open folder. Rather than you watch me try to do a bunch of random stuff. Let's see. Alt generator, image optimizer. Maybe I have some code in there that will help. In file, get, post, upload. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to copy some information, make life a little bit easier, and then we'll walk through what I'm doing here. Okay, so I am creating an upload endpoint that will parse the body, and it will grab the file from that. This is just going to tell us some information about the file. I'm going to use uploads.write, which I don't have an uploads directory defined. So this is how we do things here. We can say const uploads is going to be storage, and I'm just going to call this public. And actually, maybe I should just call this public so that we are very clear on this. So we will do a storage public, and this will just basically say anything that we upload. This is essentially the path for it, right? So it's just a sort of a prefix, but we can easily incorporate that prefix into something we already create so that we don't have to worry about trying to specify the full path every single time, and it just makes life a little bit easier. So we are going to, rather than go to uploads, we're going to write this to public. And we are going to use the file name, whatever we use for it, and then we just use the file.array buffer, and that will give us the that will go ahead and give us the information that we need, and or that'll give us the binary that we need to write. And I'm not going to pass in any additional things right now. We'll get to that in a second. We can spit out the result, what we have, and then we'll just spit back that it was uploaded. And I am not going to worry about we can cache this. If there's an error, we'll just say, I love when I do that. Here we go. If there's an error, we're just going to say an error occurred while uploading the file. If you watch back, we just did a thing on, we did a live stream a couple weeks ago, maybe it was, on the new storage, the ability to block writes if a object exists, which is a pretty cool feature that we've added in, that S3 added and we incorporated. So, all right, so if this uploads correctly, we'll say that it uploaded correctly. Otherwise, it will go ahead and I'll just do a console.error to be a little more complete here, and we'll log that error out and then say we couldn't upload the file. Okay, so I'm not going to do anything special here right now. I'm just going to use this as is. And then, I'm getting an error, so that's good. What do I have an error on? Let's see. Transform failed with one error. Public is a reserved word. Oh, maybe I can't use public. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, how would we call it? Public bucket, like that. And reserved words. Okay, so we're going to do public bucket like that, right? Good. File.name. Why does it not like it? It does not exist on string file, array buffer. I'm 100% sure that it does, but it looks like we were getting the TS ignores. I must have used that last time, so I'm sure there's something I can bring in that would fix that, but I'm just going to ignore those two lines so we don't have to deal with it. Save this, and I'll clear. Oops. I'm just going to clear that out. Okay. All right, so we should now have a directory which we can upload a file to, which is great. So let's do this. This is, of course, synced to our fantastic code. This is our development environment or our sandbox that we're working on right now, and it'll be to /upload. So I'm going to copy this, and let's see if I've got Postman open. I do. So let's open up Postman over here and bring this over here. So now we have Postman here, and I'm going to create a new request. This is going to be a post request. It's going to go to /upload like that. I think we call it /upload, right? /upload, yeah. And then we need to upload a file. So we are going to change the body to binary and select a file and new file from the machine. I don't know what any of these things are, but I guess let's see what space is. And we'll go ahead and hit send. And let's see if this works. Internal server error, good. All right, always good to get errors and know what is going on. Cannot read property of undefined reading name. Interesting. Can't read name. And that is on line 11. Upload async. Okay, hold on a second. Let's debug. So I'm going to save this without. I'll just return back c.html test just so that we get something back. I'm sure I could dig into that more. Let's try uploading this again. Send. And this is going to say cannot read properties of undefined name on index 1128. So this is all the way up here, 1128. Not sure that I, let's try something here. Make sure that I'm not, oh, public bucket, oh yeah, I'm hiding, okay, let's try it again. All right, so that worked. So what is it missing? Oh, you know what it is? Okay, hold on a second. Let's see if I think I understand what it's doing. It's probably not calling it file, right? Let's just log out the body and see what that gives us for information. Let's try this again. So body is empty. So is there a body file? This should be working. I'll say a body file is undefined. Content length, image, JPEG. Why is it not reading that in? Oh, this should be binary. This should all be correct. Okay, well, something's going on here, and I'm sure it's simple, and I'm sure if somebody was paying attention, they could figure it out for me. All right, so why is it not reading body file in? Well, let's go. I think if I because it's not a named, is it just the full body itself? It could be. Let's see. Let's do this. Let's go over to hono.dev and we'll go to docs, and this will be, I'm assuming, oops, not under there, APIs, routing context. Okay, so body, this is guides. File upload. Oh no, how about this? Okay, so this parse body file. So you can upload a file with multi-part form data. Oh, that's if it's multi-part form data. Okay, API. Oh, so, okay. Let's do this. I think all right, it just might just be the way that we're trying to upload it here. So if we were to change this to multi-part form data, and then one of these things here we can change to a file. We'll call this file, I think we just call it file, and then we can select the file, and we will select space again. Oops, that's what I want. I want a space, and hit open. Okay, so this should now, if I send this, this should give us the information. Okay, so that's just, okay. All right, so let me Control Z my way back to some sort of better reality here. That should be good, 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 good. Save. Good, space.jpg. Okay, try this again. Uploaded. All right, perfect. So now what we should see in our, over here, we're gonna go to our Jeremy Ampt, and we'll go to storage, and under public, we should now see that we have the space. Pretty picture of space, great. Okay, so now we have this picture of space. That's great. So again, I'm gonna Let me double check something. I think this is always, let's inspect, because I want to be able to show this, and I think I might have to publish this in order for it to work. So under here, our headers, oh, and actually I'm loading this from the wrong way. I need to load this from the public URL like this, and then go into inspect and look at the network tab, and we'll refresh this again. And so now I have space, and this is giving me no caching headers as well. So I'm going to get my miss from CloudFront. If I refresh this, this will give me a refresh hit from CloudFront. Okay, so every time I upload a file into even my local sandbox or my developer sandbox, there's no cache headers on that at all. And if we were to publish this, just make it easy, I guess, we'll just deploy this, deploy to prod like this. So give this a second to deploy to prod. We'll now have that endpoint available there, and we can upload a file into that endpoint as well. So just give it a second. And while that is uploading, we can go ahead and grab this, this magical stack URL like this. And we'll jump over to Postman, and I'm going to create another Postman route so that we don't lose the first one. We'll do this one /upload. Always helpful if you spell it correctly. And then the body is going to be form data, and we are going to change this to a file, name this file, and select a file, which we will select space again like that. Okay, open. All right, so now we have this published, and so we should be able to go ahead and upload this to the to the production environment, which it says that it was. So we can come over here and click over into prod and look at storage, and we see in public we now have both storage and space. And if I open this, this is the one now on the magical stack. Inspect this, go over to the network tab and refresh, and we'll see that space is in fact a miss from CloudFront the first time. Refresh it again, and it should be a refresh hit from CloudFront. Okay, so this file is every single time a user hits this file and it's not cached on their local machine, it is going to essentially refresh it and load it again from the origin, which is the S3 bucket that is storing this file. Okay, this is what we want to avoid. Took a while to get here, but essentially, if you go to the storage documentation, there is the notion of serving public files, and it says that we can use, let me find that again, serving public files, that we can use this max age parameter. So what I'm going to do is, this is max age in seconds. So I'm going to copy this max age here, and I'm going to go over to where we upload. And then what I'm going to do is, because we're going to parse the body, we can actually, should be able to do this. The constant will say max age, and this will equal body max age. And again, we don't have to do that here. This is something we can do programmatically as part of what we do. But when we actually write the file to the public buffer, then we can send in max age, and we are going to send in max age as, we can just do max age, right? We're calling it max age, so it should, max age is not assignable. String file is not assignable to number, the type string is not assignable to type number. Okay, so we are just going to go ahead and say this is either going to be what we send in for max age, or it's going to be 0. And this is giving me more junk here, so I'm just going to ignore that. Again, if you want to fight with, TypeScript errors, you probably should, but for the point of this demo, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so we should now have the ability to set the max age for these things here. So I'm going to just deploy this to production. So this will be in production. We probably should have tested it first, but I'm going to deploy this into production so that we have it. And then I'm going to go over to back to Postman. I'm going to go back to this here, and I'm going to add a new thing called max age. And I'm going to set this for, I'll just set it for 10. And then I'll go ahead and send this. And this should upload that same file again. But this time, this file should be on the magical stack. I'm going to refresh this. So this is the new one here. And I get, let's see, did this work? Content type, refresh. I'm still getting the refresh hit from that there. It might be because I have to replace the file, or maybe I'm going to check. As soon as this is deployed, did this deploy here? Deployed. Okay, so we're deployed into production. Let me try this in production. Go over here, magical stack, and it also could be my code might be missing something. It might not actually be setting something correctly. So I'm going to come here and set the max age. We might have to test this in a minute. Oh, you know what it might be doing? Is it going to set the max age as a string, and I might have to parse that out. Okay, let's just try something here. I'll set this for 15. I'm going to go ahead and upload this. That says it's uploaded. Here is this code. I'm going to refresh this, go over here. Oh, and we're getting our max age. Oh, did I go to the wrong one? Fantastic code. Wait, which one is my... Should probably figure out a better way to do this, right? So magical stack is prod. Okay, so this is fantastic code. So I'm now seeing the max age 10 for this one, which is what I want. And then over here, I'm going to refresh here, refresh, and I get here max age 15. Okay, so now this has a max age of 15, which means that it should... This shows as a refresh hit, but if I refresh this again, this should, oops, cache control, no cache. That's the request header. Hold on, Xcache. So hit from CloudFront. Okay, so now this is actually a hit from CloudFront, as it will show again here. That one was a refresh hit from CloudFront. And this is a hit from CloudFront. Okay, so once that 15 seconds goes by, we should see, yeah, so that's what, so we're getting it as it loads. It's going to cache this in CloudFront for us and load it from the cache, as opposed to having to request it again and have it be a miss. So if we wait a couple of seconds here and let that 15 seconds go by and then hit refresh again, then we should get a refresh hit from CloudFront. Right, so when it's a hit from CloudFront, it knows, hey, this is, we're downloading the version there. Otherwise, is, I guess, getting it from the actual browser cache itself. Now, there's a couple of cool things that you can do, well, let's not go there yet. So with the storage interface, you're allowed to set those headers, that max or the max age header, and that allows you to do some of that caching stuff. And that won't change the image until that cache expires, or you publish your application again, and it would basically invalidate the cache for you. So anyways, what's nice about this is that this allows you to set really, really long-term things. So like if it's a PDF, if it's a PDF document or something like that you want to upload, but it's like that document is likely not going to change, you can set a really long, I think you can set up to 100 years if you wanted to, but you can send a really long cache header on it, or set a long cache header on it, and that allows you to basically always, or not have to constantly pulling it from the origin server. So again, it just reduces the network traffic, reduces the latency for you, and gives you that control there. Okay, this took a lot longer to explain than it needed to, probably, or I guess I slowed it down a little bit. So I want to get to one other thing, because this to me is really where you can start seeing some optimizations in your applications, especially around things like APIs and stuff like that. So a static asset, yes, you're going to cache that. That's going to get cached, right? And if you have dynamic things happening, I mean, certainly you can cache single page apps, stuff like that. You don't always have to load those from the server. But even if you're potentially generating dynamic pages that are fully dynamic, but can, don't need to, don't necessarily need to refresh every single time or need to be fresh every single time, or an API that you want to cache some results from. There's some interesting things that we can do there as well. So I'm going to close down the image stuff here because we don't need it right now. And I'm just going to go back to here, and I'm going to build a new endpoint here that is just going to be a get endpoint. And I'm going to say that this is not download file. Let me just do this. I'm going to do this is going to be /API/ user123 or something like that. So let's say that this, or I would say users or user/123. All right, I'm just going to set this now just so that it's there. And actually, you know what I can do? Yeah, we don't have to overcomplicate this. So this is just going to be a route that, let's assume that this is a route that's dynamic or whatever, and somebody has, actually I should do that. I'm sorry. Let me just do this as a parameter so that it's here. I'm going to do :user ID like this. All right, and that way we can see how it will change and how it'll be a little bit dynamic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead here and set user ID as C params, which is not right. It should be param and then user ID like this, and I'm pretty sure it's c.rec.params. And just to make sure, let me go back to routing and path parameter and just make sure, yeah, okay, c.rec param. Okay, so we're going to bring in user ID like this, and then we're going to just respond back with the user ID, the person's name, which I guess we'll call this, we'll say John Doe, and then we'll just say john@doe.com. And then I'm going to generate a rand number, and this is going to be math.random, and like this. And then I'm going to do return c.json user. Okay, so we've created this now. And if I were to jump over to my fantastic code, which should be the dynamic one, right? Just double check. Prod is magical stack. Okay, so fantastic code is my dev environment. And I was to go to /user/123 and hit refresh. I should see that I get not found because I am at /API/user. So that is just my fault. Like this. Okay, so now we have ID123, John Doe, john@doe.com, and then 0.06, something like that. And maybe what I'll do just to, why don't we do this? We'll do times 1,000, and then we'll do math.floor like that, and we'll just wrap that number like this. Come over here, refresh. All right, so now we have, let's do it times 10,000, so we have a little more diversity in the number. Okay, refresh. Okay, so now we have John Doe, 1475. If I refresh this and I refresh it, that number, this number here is going to keep on changing. I should use my draw on the screen thing. This number is going to change every single time I refresh. Okay, that's exactly the behavior that we would normally expect because it makes sense. We want to have that behavior. But there's something cool that we can do. If we want to change the way that that data is cached and how long that would actually be saved, we could save this data locally, like we could cache it locally. Let's assume we were pulling from a database. Like right now we're not, but assuming you take this user ID in, you have to go ahead and query that user, you have to pull back all the information, you have to format it, and then you got to spit it out. So one of the things that we can do, again, this is just pretty simple with Hono, is when we are spitting out the context, we can also spit out a, if I can find it, we can spit out a header. And I don't know why I can't see it here. Show you quickly. Headers. I don't want the middleware for headers. I just want the Hono, just want the output. Environment, event, context, variable, map. Okay, Hono set, Hono set headers. Context. Isn't that where we were? I thought that's where we were. Context, header. Okay, well, maybe not. All right. So, anyways, oh, this is this is incoming header. We don't want incoming headers. We want to set the header. Set headers is just c.header, c.status. Yes. So this should be what we need. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, so we can set the header. So if we come here and we say c dot header, and we want to change this to cache control like this, and then we want to set a max age in here, and I've just because again, things like capitalization and those things, let me just double check. Max dash age is what we want to set, right? Max dash age equals. Okay, so we want to come over here and set a max dash age, and we want to equal, I'm just going to set this to 10 right now and just show you how this works. So we've set this to 10. And we now have this response that should come back and set a cache header or a cache max age header for us. So I'm going to refresh this. We'll see that this changes to 918. If I go to the last one here, we'll see that the cache control is set to max age 0 like it's supposed to be, but we'll also see that we get this X cache control. So the system automatically knows, oh, you're trying to cache this for a period of time, but because we're in a dev environment, I'm going to override your cache control, set that to 0, because again, it could get really confusing if you accidentally cache something in your dev environment CDN for like a year, and then you can't figure out why you're trying to do something there. So we automatically handle that for you, and you can see what you're trying to set the cache control to be using this X cache control from the request headers or the response headers. Okay, so if I refresh this, every time I refresh this, you're going to see that this number keeps on changing. All right, let's publish this to production. And see how it behaves differently there. So I'm going to deploy this to prod. We'll give that a second to deploy. And we set it to 10. We probably should have added in the ability to add a dynamic thing, but that's okay. 10 seconds isn't too long to wait. I can talk for many 10-second blocks if I needed to. I might not say much, but at least I can fill the space. All right, so this should almost be done deploying, and as soon as this is done, let's go ahead and grab the magical stack. So I'm going to grab the same exact thing here, and I'm going to paste us over here. I'm not going to hit enter yet. Okay, so we're deployed. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and load this now on our magical stack. I load this, and now this gives me 5459. If we go in and we look at this, we're going to see that we have that max age 10. So if I refresh this again, this 549 is not changing here. And I should, hold on, let me zoom in here so that we can see this. Okay, so this 549. All right, now if I refresh again, now it will change, right? And it will change because it was a miss from CloudFront. But if I refresh it again, it stays that. And we'll just keep refreshing, and now we see that it changed again. And the cool thing here is that if I was to refresh this, well, let's see if I can do this in another window. So I'm going to open another window here, and this time I'm going to access user 321. So when I access user 321 over here, I get 321 cached. Over here, I'll get a new oops, it's going to hide on me. Right, so I'm getting 3935, and now I get a new one here. So this is caching each one independently because of the route there. And so if this is happening behind the scenes, and you're caching this, an API route, for example, like you don't have to worry. Like the browser and CDN will automatically handle that for you. You have control over it. And I set it for 10 seconds. And again, maybe if you're loading user information or something like that, 10 seconds, maybe that's too much. But let's say that you're querying for like trending items in a store or something like that, and you have an API that has to reach out and load a list of trending things. Being able to cache that is super important. You're probably already caching that somewhere else because you don't want to calculate that trending products request every single time. You want to do something where you're caching that complex query. You're caching that at least within the application itself, using something like Memcache or Redis or Memento or one of these other ones, you would be caching it there anyways. The problem with caching it there is then this idea that, okay, everybody, or every application that I have, whether you're using HTMX and fetching it, or you're using React, or you're using anything that has to fetch now this API that has to call. The problem is that your browser is now making another HTTP request that has to go all the way back to your origin in order to grab that data from the origin. If you're using, even if you're using ECS or you're using Lambda, like you're just running more compute, even just to serve back that bit of static content. So if you have the ability to, if you can design your application in a way in which you can cache some of these endpoints, even if it's for, I don't know, 5 seconds, 1 second, right? I mean, sometimes you may have stuff that you say, look, this can actually be cached for an hour and I don't have to necessarily worry about refreshing it. You could always change it if you want to add a query string to it. So it's something that, should be able to show you here. I'm on the wrong screen. If you were to do like test equal 1 here, for example, that'll, every time I do this, I'll get the same one. But if I change this to like test 2, now the URL has changed, so it uses the query the query string values to change it. So if you really did have to force a change, you could force a change even if you were caching something. Now again, it can get a little bit complex depending on what your use cases are, what your workloads are. But I find this really, really helpful to really make your applications a little bit snappier, right? I mean, you're already caching a bunch of these static assets. Even some of the stuff that's dynamic doesn't have to be dynamic in the sense that it has to be refreshed every couple of seconds. And what else is cool is that even if you have a relatively low max age that you set, what's cool is that every user from that region is going to get the cached version of it as soon as that is in the cache, right? So if you think about just simply saying, well, I need the information to be dynamic, like it can't be more than 2 seconds old or something like that. And let's say that you had a really, really high velocity, or quite a bit of traffic that was accessing that. You're caching it for just a few seconds, right? But by caching it, you're eliminating every other single one of those home runs back to your origin servers in order to make that happen. And from a distributed standpoint, that saves a lot of time. It saves a lot of egress fees. It saves a lot of compute power, and it saves a ton of latency when you can actually cache some of these things and make it snappy. And even if that one person who hits it has to go back to the origin in order to bring that into the cache, everybody else who hits it after that, for whatever that window is that you set, they're going to get better performance. And again, the data needing to be up to the the millisecond or the microsecond, being updated every microsecond is probably not a requirement of your application. It very well may be, but I think for most applications you probably don't need to do that, and there's just a lot of power that you can get out of doing it this way. Okay, we are over time. So yeah, I mean, one of the things we didn't quickly talk about was you can actually with CloudFront, you can set if you want it to be cached in the browser for longer than you want it to be cached in the CloudFront distribution. We actually didn't talk about this. Is kind of an important thing. So for example, if you want to cache something in someone's browser, like I don't know what it might be, but something that you might want to cache for longer in their browser than you would want to cache it in the CloudFront distribution, you can do that as well, so that you have a little more nuance there. You got to think about what your strategy is and why you might do that. But it does give you the ability. You can do a max age and an S max age. You can add that to that cache control header. And that will give you the ability to actually control how long it's stored in CloudFront versus how long it's stored in your browser's cache or in your user's browser cache as well. So something you can look at there. Anyways, sign up for Ampt, give it a try. Essentially, it just, hopefully you saw how easy it was to just kind of, make changes. We debugged something wasn't working right. We got all the messages we needed. It was pretty easy to debug that. give it a try, reach out. Happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And other than that, good luck with caching. Don't over cache, especially places like they can cause a lot of problems. But there are a few places where you can really, really benefit, save yourself some dollars and save yourself a ton of performance and, again, really make your application pretty snappy. So anyways, until next week,